The reigning world champion just accused the FIA of turning Formula One into something unrecognizable. Not slower. Not safer. Unrecognizable. After driving the 2026 car in Bahrain, Max Verstappen didn't hold back. He called it anti-racing. He said it feels like Formula E with steroids. And what he revealed about energy limits, artificial overtakes, and sudden power loss at over 200 miles per hour could trigger the biggest regulatory crisis in modern Formula One. Multiple champions are now raising safety concerns. Drivers are warning about unpredictable speed differences on straights. And insiders fear the sport's identity is quietly being rewritten. But here's the part nobody is talking about. If Verstappen is right, the problem is not performance. It's philosophy. And if the FIA miscalculated this, reversing it could take years. Stay with me, because what was discovered in Bahrain testing might completely change how we see the 2026 era. What happened in Bahrain was not a random complaint. It was a controlled explosion. Because Verstappen did not speak after a bad session. He was fast. He completed the program. The car worked. And that is exactly why this is dangerous. When a driver struggles, people say it is frustration. When the fastest driver on the grid says something is fundamentally wrong, people listen. But here is where things shift. The issue is not raw speed. The 2026 cars are fast in a straight line. Very fast. With reduced drag and massive electrical output, they reach extreme top speeds with alarming ease. On paper, that sounds impressive. It sounds innovative. It sounds like progress. But Verstappen's problem was what happens before and after that straight. Because now, the driver cannot simply attack. He cannot choose when to deploy full power based on instinct. The battery usage is mapped. Predefined zones. Predetermined deployment windows. If you push outside the window, you pay for it later. If you defend too aggressively, you might arrive at the end of the straight with no electrical boost left. And at over 200 miles per hour, losing power is not just frustrating. It is exposing. It changes how you fight. It changes how you defend. It changes how you think. And this is the psychological shift nobody expected. Drivers are no longer racing corner to corner. They are calculating lap to lap. Energy saving becomes survival. Overtaking becomes scheduled. Attack becomes strategy software. Verstappen described it as synthetic. And that word matters. Because Formula One has always sold something visceral. Mechanical grip. Throttle control. Late braking duels. Now imagine approaching a braking zone knowing the car, not your right foot, decides how much power you had on the straight. That removes instinct. And when instinct disappears, unpredictability disappears. But here is the uncomfortable question. If overtakes depend on energy presets, are we watching racing? Or are we watching energy allocation management at extreme speed? And this is only block one. Because once other drivers began speaking, the concerns multiplied. And what they revealed next makes Verstappen's criticism look like just the beginning. Then something even more alarming happened. It was not just Verstappen anymore. Lewis Hamilton stepped out of the car and described a completely different kind of problem. Not philosophy. Physics. He explained that at the end of the long Bahrain straight, the electrical power can suddenly fade. Not gradually. Suddenly. And when one car is deploying full energy while another is harvesting, the closing speed becomes extreme. Unpredictable. Potentially dangerous. Imagine approaching a braking zone at over 200 miles per hour. One driver has full deployment. The other is recharging. The speed delta is massive. Now multiply that by 20 cars. This is not just about racing purity. This is about reaction time. But that is only one layer. Because George Russell took it further. He did not talk about performance. He talked about consequences. The new regulations reduce drag significantly. That means higher top speeds. But at the same time, overall aerodynamic load in certain phases is lower. So you arrive faster. With less grip. And if something goes wrong, you have less margin to recover. Russell warned that circuits were not designed for low downforce projectiles at those speeds. And when the director of the Drivers' Association uses language like that, it carries weight. But here is where it becomes political. When drivers complain about comfort, it is noise. When they question safety, it becomes pressure. And pressure on the FIA, especially before a regulation cycle even begins, is dangerous territory. Because the governing body has spent years selling this as the future. Sustainable. Technologically relevant. Aligned with automotive trends. Yet inside the cockpit, drivers are describing something else. Heavier cars. Harder tires. Less mechanical grip in slow corners. More dependency on electrical timing. And that combination creates a strange paradox. The cars are rockets in a straight line. but unpredictable when you actually need confidence. And here is the branch most people missed. Active aerodynamics. Movable elements that change configuration between straight and corner. In theory, efficiency. In reality, complexity. If the system closes even slightly late before braking, the rear can destabilize instantly. At extreme speed. Now imagine wheel-to-wheel combat in that scenario. One tiny delay. One small software lag. And the car snaps. Drivers reported feeling tension every time they approached turn 1. Not because of another driver. Because of the system. And that shifts the fear. It is no longer about who outbrakes who. It is about whether the machine responds exactly on time. And that is not what Formula One built its legacy on. But here is where the story becomes bigger than Bahrain testing. Because once multiple champions align in concern, fans begin to question. Sponsors begin to question. Broadcasters begin to question. If the spectacle becomes artificial. If overtakes are dictated by energy windows. If drivers are forced to lift and coast even in qualifying just to recharge. Then what exactly are we watching? A race. Or a carefully balanced electrical strategy contest. And the FIA now faces a dilemma. Admit adjustments are needed. Or stand firm and risk a narrative spiral before the first race. But we are still not at the core. Because what this really exposes is a deeper tension inside Formula One. A tension between engineering relevance and racing identity. And that is where the real trouble begins. Now we arrive at the uncomfortable center of this entire situation. Because this is no longer just about how the car feels. It is about what Formula One is becoming. The 2026 regulations were designed with a clear objective. Increase electrical power dramatically. Reduce reliance on traditional combustion output. Make the sport more relevant to modern automotive manufacturers. On paper, that sounds strategic. Forward-thinking. Future-proof. But here is the hidden cost. When almost half of your performance depends on battery deployment, the racing changes completely. Drivers are no longer managing tires first. They are managing energy first. They are thinking about harvesting zones, deployment curves, override timing. And if they miscalculate, even slightly, they become vulnerable in seconds. That vulnerability is not gradual. It is binary. You either have power, or you do not. And at extreme speed, that difference is brutal. Now imagine defending your position in the final laps. You want to fight. You want to push. But you cannot. Because if you drain too much battery defending, you will have nothing left on the main straight. So you compromise. You calculate. You survive. That is not instinctive racing. That is resource management under pressure. And this is where Verstappen's comment becomes more than just criticism. When he said it feels synthetic, he was not attacking sustainability. He was attacking control. Because historically, Formula One rewarded bravery, late braking, throttle precision, risk management in the moment. Now, the risk is mathematical, pre-programmed, predictable. And if overtakes depend on pressing an override within a predefined zone, the question becomes unavoidable. Is that driver skill? Or system optimization? But here is the deeper branch. Manufacturers love these regulations. High electrical output, energy efficiency relevance, marketing alignment with road cars. From a corporate perspective, this is logical. From a racing perspective, it is controversial. And that tension is where the FIA's real problem lies. Because the governing body must satisfy two worlds: automotive industry relevance and pure sporting authenticity. If you lean too far toward industry, you risk alienating the core audience. If you ignore sustainability, you risk losing manufacturers. It is a delicate balance. But Bahrain exposed something unexpected. The drivers themselves are questioning the balance. Not privately, publicly. And that is rare. Because drivers usually adapt. They complain, then adjust. This time, the tone feels different. More unified. More concerned. Almost cautious. And here is the detail that makes this even more fragile. We have not seen full race simulations under real pressure. We have not seen safety cars. We have not seen chaotic restarts. We have not seen rain. All of those variables amplify energy management complexity. So if the system already feels restrictive in testing, what happens in unpredictable race conditions? Does strategy override racing completely? Do we see cars coasting more than attacking? Do we see artificial bursts replacing genuine battles? If that becomes the visual reality on television, the narrative shifts fast. And perception in Formula One is everything. The FIA can handle technical criticism. It is much harder to handle credibility erosion. Because once fans begin to feel that the sport is over-engineered and under-driven, that reputation sticks. And here is the final layer building beneath all of this. If early races confirm the drivers' fears, mid-season regulatory adjustments become politically explosive. Admitting major changes would mean admitting miscalculation. Refusing changes would mean ignoring safety and driver feedback. Either path carries risk. And that is why the Bahrain comments were not random frustration. They were early warning signals. The 2026 era was supposed to be a celebration of evolution. Instead, before it even begins, it is facing identity questions. And when a reigning champion openly questions the direction of the sport, the issue is no longer technical. It becomes existential. And the real test is still ahead. Because once the lights go out for the first race, there will be nowhere left to hide. But there is one more layer that makes this even more volatile. The political layer. Because whenever drivers unite, even subtly, the balance of power inside Formula One shifts. Rumors began circulating in Bahrain that the Grand Prix Drivers Association is considering formal communication with the FIA. Not a boycott. Not a rebellion. But a structured request for adjustments. Energy deployment limits. Override activation zones. Safety margins on high-speed sections. Small changes on paper. Massive implications in reality. Because if the FIA accepts modifications before the first race, it sends a message. It signals that the original framework may have missed something critical. And if they refuse, the narrative becomes even more dangerous. Drivers ignored. Safety concerns minimized. Champions dissatisfied. And this is where the situation becomes fragile. Formula One thrives on internal tension. But it cannot afford public division between its stars and its regulators. Especially not before launching a brand new technical era. Now think about the optics. Verstappen questions the identity. Hamilton questions the speed differences. Russell questions safety. Alonso questions driver control. When different personalities with different interests align around similar concerns, that is not coincidence. That is pattern recognition. But here is the twist most people are not seeing. The 2026 cars may actually reward a completely different type of driver. Not the most aggressive. Not the most instinctive. But the most analytical. The ones who process information fastest. Who calculate energy curves in real time. Who treat racing like high-speed chess. And that changes the competitive hierarchy. It changes who thrives. It changes who struggles. It changes how championships are won. Because if instinct becomes secondary to energy calculation, some drivers will adapt quickly. Others will resist. And in that transition period, results could look artificial. Not because the cars are slower, but because the skill set required is shifting. And when the required skill set shifts dramatically, fans feel it. They might not understand the technical details. But they sense when something feels different. When overtakes look automated. When drivers coast into corners. When battles feel timed rather than fought. That perception spreads fast. And perception drives engagement. Engagement drives value. Value drives the entire ecosystem of the sport. This is why Verstappen's words are more explosive than they appear. He did not just criticize a car. He questioned the soul of the category. And if the first few races of the 2026 season validate even half of these concerns, the pressure on the FIA will multiply instantly. Sponsors will demand clarity. Teams will demand flexibility. Drivers will demand safety assurances. And fans will demand authenticity. That is the crossroads forming right now. Bahrain was only testing. Controlled environment. Limited chaos. No championship pressure. And still, tension surfaced. So imagine the first real duel for victory. Last laps. Low battery. Override active. Two cars approaching a braking zone at extreme speed. One harvesting. One deploying. If that moment defines the era, it will either justify the vision or confirm the fear. And that is why the 2026 cars are not just a technical revolution. They are a gamble. A calculated gamble by the FIA. A gamble that sustainability and spectacle can coexist without compromise. A gamble that drivers will adapt quietly. A gamble that fans will embrace the change. But Bahrain exposed something unexpected. The drivers are not quiet. And if the very athletes who define the sport feel disconnected from the machines they drive, then the biggest challenge facing the FIA is not engineering. It is trust.